All right, folks, welcome to the January 19th edition of Quantum Leap. We're excited to have motion graphics and animation expert Karl Pontau here today. Welcome, Karl. We're
Thanks.
excited to have you.
Glad to be here.
And before I get to Karl, just want to introduce my esteemed co host, Corey Knott. Corey, how are you today?
I am doing very well. Thank you, David.
A very nice shirt. Is that a Jay Hilbert?
No, it is not, unfortunately.
It's
A nice
good
shirt.
either way. It's good to mix it up. Um, well, with that, I wanted to just give a little bit of a testimonial for Karl. You know, he's one of the few expert motion graphic artists that I know. I know most of us are kind of dabblers, and but Karl's actually made a business out of motion graphics and animation. He really takes it to that much of a higher level, and I really admire how much actually goes into um, one the process of it, but really to produce something that is in line with the client expectations is something that's very challenging. I find I can produce my own motion graphics because I know the brand and everything else, but to meet somebody cold and to develop a motion graphic sequence or animation, I could see is there's a lot of pitfalls there. And but I think it's one of the most powerful things in this digital age, which is why I wanted to bring Karl on. And he actually participated in a pilot episode that we couldn't use just because it was a little bit rough, and we were kind of still getting the podcast off the ground. Corey wasn't even a part of that either, so I just want to give him the opportunity to come back and give the kind of full presentation here. And with that, I did want to ask Corey that he's actually known Karl for longer than I have. If you don't mind, Corey, just telling us about how you guys met and what your experience and knowledge about Karl is.
I think we met when Carl first joined BNI. I went out to
Yep.
Livermore and had a one-to-one with him, and he did attend one of my programs. And so we've met many times over the years at various networking events. And it's people in animation are part of my contacts here, and so I keep them on my list of people. If they ask for that kind of thing, I know who to refer to. And I just think he's an interesting guy. To watch him grow through BNI and grow his business has been it's been great to watch.
Great. Yeah. And Karl, I have actually given you screen sharing privileges. If there's an example or something that comes to mind, you want to share something from your website, we'll give you the opportunity to do that when you see fit. Otherwise, I want to just jump right into it and just have you tell us, Karl, about your story and your background of your business. You know how you got into
Sure.
animation and what you do today.
Sure. Yeah. So instead of trying to play stuff during the meeting just because bandwidth and usually there's a bunch of delay, if you want, I can basically share some links you can post in the comments underneath this podcast. Once it's over, people can watch stuff at their leisure. That'll probably be better for this overall viewing experience. As for why I started my company, it's I have a whole story about that I can dive into. So I mean, I've been an artist my entire life. I grew up drawing, painting, sculpting, big Legos kid, and I got my passion for storytelling from my dad. He's a really good storyteller, and I knew I wanted to study animation when I saw the first Toy Story film. I was like, "Do that! I gotta do that! That's so cool!" Um, and then, beginning of 2002, I started to feel like something wasn't quite right with me physically. I had been a competitive swimmer my whole life, so I knew what I was supposed to feel like. And it wasn't like, "Oh, my shoulder kind of hurts," just a general blah feeling. But by August, they still hadn't figured out what was wrong with me, and I had lost 50 pounds and had sunken cheeks and eyes. I was really pale. Started to get really bad headaches. So my parents took me for an MRI up in Walnut Creek. We were waiting around for another appointment when my pediatrician called and said he's going to drive up from Pleasanton to come talk with us. And we saw him walking up with this big envelope in his hands. You could tell he'd been crying. And he brought us into a little side meeting room. I remember I was sitting knee to knee with him in this big U-shaped chair with really high armrests, kind of leaning forward like this. And he pulls out the results of the MRI and shows me I have two brain tumors. And it felt like I got punched in the chest. I actually moved backwards in my chair. And then for the next 2 weeks, everything sounded like the adults from Peanuts. It's kind of wah, 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 because Never had the flu, never broken any major bones, never been stung by a bee. Pretty sure I've never been bitten by a mosquito. So to get brain tumor diagnosis at 15 was just a complete sucker punch out of nowhere. But I got so much help from friends and family, and like my high school adjusted my schedule and got me a tutor so I could still graduate on time. And people that I barely knew were giving food and gifts and other support. So it really inspired me to want to give back and help as many people as I could because I'd probably be dead if it wasn't for all the help that I got. And then in undergraduate schools, I was studying animation. There was a big student digital art and design competition I participated in with a big screening at the end of like 1,000 people in this big auditorium. I knew maybe 10, but when everyone laughed at the joke of my animation, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I can connect with people and have a bigger impact on the world around me with animation and storytelling. So after grad school, I started my company, and we're like a fractional animation department working with marketing, branding, and PR companies, helping clients that are looking to explain complex concepts, answer common questions, generate more revenue, and strengthen their brand presence online. That way, more people in the community get their problem solved, the client's business does better. We get a happy client, everyone wins. It's a way for me to have a bigger positive impact on the world around me, and that's why I do what I do.
Well, thanks for that. And if you check out his website, you'll really get a better feel for his kind of animation. I just think certain stories and things are best told during animation. It's so much more powerful than any other way. So I really think that becomes clear by some of the segments that you show, so or that you produce. Um, Here's our $1 million question about how you've been adapting to the COVID environment, and are there any other kind of considerations under COVID that have made a increased awareness or utility for motion graphics?
I mean, there's obviously been a ton of impacts from COVID, and uh, I think it's kind of, I've heard it described a great way of it's kind of been like a tornado where it'll impact like one house on a block, but the next house is completely undisturbed. Um, and so, and kind of like one side of the street will be destroyed, but the other side's fine. So it's kind of a random, almost kinda impact to different industries and stuff. So directly, my industry has my or my work hasn't been impacted that much. I was already working from home and um, able to do networking on Zoom and stuff like that. A lot of the clients I've been working with, like I usually work with tech, biotech, health and wellness, and professional services companies. And a lot of them I kind of stopped doing stuff last year for a while as they were trying to figure out what was going on early in like March and April. Now I think more companies are looking to rebound from last year. They're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel as vaccines are starting to roll out. And so I think there's going to be more businesses that are looking to do more online than ever before. A lot of industries, especially like law firms, for example, that used to not do much online are kind of realizing, oh, they can do more. And it's actually worth investing in online marketing, and then they need content to kind of stay in touch with people and stay top of mind. And right now, since people are still supposed to be sheltering and stuff, it's online's the way to go. So I think there's going to be a big demand for digital marketing in general, and also people wanting more content like what my company creates to connect with their ideal audience and convey the information that they can't really communicate any other way right now.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And just to give a, I know you said you were going to put a few links that you can either send me or put in the comments, or I can put in the comments. Could you just tell us a little bit about the kind of range or the scope of things that you do and the type of projects, like maybe a recent segment that you produce that you're kind of proud of,
Sure.
about how you use this stuff for businesses, for your clients?
Yeah. So like we work with a wide variety of different companies on different projects with different results in mind for what the client's trying to accomplish. So right now we're working on a project for a well-funded startup that's developing the next generation lithium-ion battery technology. So we're explaining what makes their technology different. That's being aimed at other battery engineers, so it's very a little more technical than a lot of animations we've done. Um, Another one we did late last year was we made a couple animations. Actually, three. One explaining IRAs and the other two explaining bonds for a local wealth advisor. wanted to kind of automate some of the general information Q&A she does with her clients. So she's putting these on her website. We also did one late last year for a nonprofit that is advocating for this technology. They're called air standpipes. It's like a water standpipe for high rise that allows firefighters to get water up in the building. Well, air standpipes allow firefighters to refill their air tanks on every third floor in a high rise. So they wanted an animation to help them explain the importance of this technology and why it should be required for developers to include it in the buildings. And right now I'm in talks with a couple realtors and a company that does they help companies um, get like they save money on credit card transactions. There's a bunch of fees that happen in the background that most companies aren't aware of, and so they help companies send the right information along so they get better rates on their credit card transactions. Some I had no idea even existed. So that's one thing I love about what I do is I get to get glimpses into all these different industries and fields of business. But yeah, like I said, it's a wide variety of messages and content and clients, but really it comes down to the four results that people are looking for, which is explaining complex concepts, answering common questions, increasing revenue, or just strengthening their brand presence online. Are the kind of the four umbrella needs people have. Once kind of identify what they're trying to accomplish, then we just work backwards through like what who their target audience is and then what the message is that's going to get them the results they want, and then creating an animation that conveys that message effectively.
Great, thank you. And with that, I'll turn it over to Corey for some of his questions or any comments he
Cool.
has thus far.
Yeah, Carl. So, you were talking a little bit about some of your clients earlier. Who is your ideal client?
So, ideal clients are in the tech, biotech, health and wellness, and professional services. Ideal size is usually in that 20 to 200 million revenue range, but we do work with smaller companies. Um, and yeah, because those industries often have the people doing the work and the people they're trying to communicate to usually have different varying understandings of the sort of work they're doing. It's like if you ever talk to an engineer, they speak engineer. They don't really speak English. So if they're trying to explain something to a non-engineer, they often include a lot of jargon that they understand and really care about, but the person they're trying to communicate with often doesn't understand it and doesn't really need to know all that detail. Or if you ever like read a legal contract and you don't understand legalese, your eyes kind of glaze over. Same thing with like insurance. So there's a lot of industries where people really need to understand what's going on, make informed decisions, or know why they should use a certain business's services. But trying to bridge that communication gap in those four kind of verticals is particularly challenging. So that's where animation really has a lot of value in um, clarifying the abstract concepts and helping people really make those ideas stick with the visuals, and also just the stronger emotional messaging that is often absent in those sorts of kind of the topics that those industries deal with is really important because people make decisions primarily on emotion. And so if you're able to communicate an emotional message to people using a story, it's much more likely to get the results the company's looking for than if they just kind of throw a bunch of facts and figures at people.
Corey, if you don't mind, I just had one comment here.
Sure.
I think, the more I've learned about video, I really think the powers in that emotion. I think you have so many more tools and options using animation to strike at those kind of emotional, heartstrings, so to speak, um, than you do just in kind of talking head or kind of standard video. So I've just, that's one thing I saw a little bit of early on, but my awareness has greatly expanded. And I think it's something that you guys have mastered. So it's great to
Cool.
hear your explanation there. Very key nugget, gold nugget.
Thanks.
Yeah. So, what is your process for creating a new segment?
Yeah, so it depends on a few different factors, but um, the main thing we start by identifying is what the client's trying to accomplish, what the results they're looking for is, and how they measure the success, whether or not they've actually achieved those results. Because that doesn't make any sense to make something if you don't know what you're aiming at. And then once we identified kind of the result they're trying to accomplish, working backwards, we identify who their target audience is they're trying to reach. and then we identify what the message they're trying to communicate is, and really get that refined down into their script and story. And then once you kind of have that figured out, because the story is the key foundation to the entire uh, production process. If that's not solid, the beginning and the rest is just kind of window dressing. So once we have the story figured out, um, the next step is we usually record voiceover and then start figuring out the visual style, what sort of imagery is going to fit with their brand, appeal to their target audience, and also fit within their time frame and budget. Once the visual style is figured out, we'll do some storyboarding and visual design, build all the assets, and the client gets to approve everything as we're going along. Once that's all approved, we'll start animating, and then during the animation process, we'll start adding in like the background music and sound effects and stuff along with the voiceover. Make sure everything's nice and synced up, and then if there's some video, we'll also film video earlier on and mix that on as well. And at the end, we export the final product, usually as something that'll go stream well online, because usually it's going on a website or social media or an email. So it's going to be usually end up on YouTube or Vimeo, and then we export the final thing and send it to the client, or usually send it to the client's marketing department or their marketing team, and make sure it gets in front of the right eyeballs. And usually for like a 1 minute animation, it usually takes about 6 weeks for that entire process, including waiting for feedback and meetings and stuff like that. So um, it's definitely worth investing in to get it done right, because they can have a huge impact on the results of a website or a marketing campaign. And also, if it's not done right, it can have the opposite results. Because people really need to have high quality content out there to get the results we're looking for. Because there's so much out there that's competing for attention that just putting anything out there isn't going to work anymore.
So then why would they want to look at motion graphics, animated segments, and so on to communicate to their potential clients? What makes that different or better in conjunction with other things?
Yeah. So I mean, that come down to a few different factors. A lot of it has to do with kind of human communication, human interaction. Using a story is much more powerful communication tool than just kind of throwing random information at people. Um, because just the way our brains work, we store information in narrative form. We're kind of hardwired to tell stories and understand stories. And also it has that emotional impact, like I mentioned before, with the right characters people can identify with and empathize with. They put themselves in the story, and you can really guide people through the process and really get the sort of impact you're looking for with the right story and the right emotion. Also, when it comes to just the format, people have short attention spans and don't like to read a lot, and so animation is much more entertaining and engaging and fun than just text and images. So when it comes to trying to influence people's behavior, whether it's to buy or to subscribe or to sign up or to donate or whatever people's call to action is, um, a good story told with an animation is going to be a lot more effective than um, text and images alone, or just using other formats besides video or animation.
Great, thanks, Carl. Really, just sorry, were you going to say something, Corey?
Nope, just saying thank you.
Very, very succinct. I had a couple things that, I really, what made me gravitate towards motion graphics that you mentioned that really struck a chord is, this notion of being entertaining and getting attention with all the content out there. So much of it's dull if you're just rehearsing facts versus a powerful story over animation. You might have 0 views for one thing, but like a million views for something else for the same thing. But it's, setting up that goal and how you're going to tell that story. So I think, that the tone, kind of what I call a metaphor, uh, a lot of times we use the wrong metaphors for things, or you see politicians do it about, they're talking about a machine metaphor when it should really be kind of a more personal metaphor for maybe for insurance. If you're just talking about the kind of boring things of insurance versus having a cool little animation, do something, it's just 100 times more effective to sell it. So I really appreciate that. And you see his, because the animations are just so likable and just so you just kind of absorb it. So
Yeah, I mean that's one strength is the one thing I enjoy and I'm particularly good at is taking a subject that people might consider dry or not super interesting and finding something that's fun about it and infusing the message and the story into the animation. And it makes it fun and entertaining because people not only is it just more likely to get people's attention, but they're more likely to remember it and also have a better they'll associate those emotions with the brand. So even if you're kind of putting something on your website that anyone can access for free, by giving away that value and getting people to have that sort of a good, warm, fuzzy experience with your brand and your content is really beneficial for companies to do because people want to they give it kind of they are enticed into wanting more. Like, it's the whole thing is like imagine if how much more they could get if they actually were if I was paying them for this service, not just using the free stuff. So that sort of model of making your business what you do fun for people to understand and learn about and want more of is a great idea if you're trying to bring in more business.
yeah, and I have a couple examples that just came to mind that I've read about. Apparently Aflac used to, nobody even knew what that was or could say the word, but once he come up with the duck,
Yep.
kind of an animated duck, then it's like the fifth most recognizable company in the world. Also think of the Geico lizard, that little animation. So you have a cute little lizard selling you insurance versus like a talking head, it just makes all the difference. I also heard a friend of mine was saying that Honda, before they have their ad play, they actually do these two sounds before every commercial. So you kind of subconsciously know it's like a Honda commercial, which I just think there's so much to know about advertising that you really need to have kind of a master or somebody who's an expert in it. If, there's a lot on the line with the startup to get some, animation that doesn't work or doing a video to save money versus where animation would make more sense. And those are a lot of the decisions that I think you can help people make and guide them through. So great to hear about your process of how you work and how you have it down to a science. And with that, I'll let everybody get back to work here. And thanks for coming on. If you guys
Thanks
have
for
any
having me.
closing comments, yeah, feel free. Yeah.
Appreciate
Okay.
you having me on the show.
All right, Carl.
Thank you,
Well,
Carl.
thanks. And we'll put those links down in the chat.
Sure.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you next week for Quantum Leap. Thanks, Corey.